The last thing I expected to hear at my own family's dinner table was my mother's voice, cold as winter steel, saying, "Christmas is better without you, Arya. Don't come again." But there I was, fork halfway to my mouth, Christmas lights twinkling behind her like some sick joke, watching my own parents deliver the kind of betrayal that splits your world in half. I'd flown 3,000 miles, burned through my vacation days. Hell, I'd even brought the wine they liked, that expensive Cabernet they always hinted about but never bought themselves, $87. Sitting right there on their table, opened, half empty. My sister Jessica leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, that familiar smirk spreading across her face like poison. "It'll just make things awkward if you show up, honestly. We've all moved on." The room went dead silent. You know that moment when your brain just stops? When the words hit you but your mind refuses to process them because they're too cruel, too impossible? The grandfather clock in the hallway kept ticking. Tick, 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 each second hammering the reality deeper. I set my fork down. Slow, deliberate. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. "Understood," I whispered. One word, that's all I gave them. Because in that moment, staring at the people who'd raised me, who I'd sent money to for 5 years straight, $1,200 a month, every month, even when I was eating ramen for dinner, I realized something that changed everything. They weren't my family anymore. They were strangers wearing familiar faces, and strangers don't deserve explanations. Mom's eyes flickered with something that might have been regret. Might have been, Dad just kept cutting his steak like nothing had happened. Jessica reached for more wine. My wine. I stood up. The chair scraped against hardwood. Loud. Final. "Thank you for dinner," I said, voice steady as a heartbeat. "And for the clarity. Before we continue with how I turned their own greed against them, I want to thank those of you who support these stories. Your contributions help me share these moments of truth with others who need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to mean defeat. Every share, every comment, every small gesture of support plants seeds of hope for someone facing their own family betrayal." Walking out that door, keys jingling in my trembling hand, I felt something shift inside me. Not grief, not anger, something colder, more calculated. I smiled in the darkness of their driveway. Because they had no idea what they'd just awakened. That was the moment I knew justice wouldn't come from tears or forgiveness or family therapy. It would come from my own hands, and it would be sweeter than any Christmas dinner they'd ever taste without me. This is just the beginning. The real feast was about to be served. That single word, "understood," hung in the air like smoke from a dying candle. I walked to my rental car in their driveway, past the Christmas wreath I'd bought them last year, still hanging crooked on their door. My hands found the steering wheel, but I couldn't turn the key. Not yet. Because sitting there, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 sacrifices, everything came flooding back. I closed my eyes and I was 22 again, fresh out of basic training, staring at my first Army paycheck. $738 after taxes. I kept $300 for myself, barely enough for rent and ramen noodles, and wired the rest home. Just until Dad gets back on his feet, Mom had said over a crackling phone line, "You know how hard it's been since the plant closed." That was 8 years ago. 8 years of splitting every paycheck down the middle while I wore the same 3 uniforms, ate at the mess hall, and pretended I didn't mind when my bunkmates talked about buying cars or taking leave to Vegas. The worst part? I actually believed I was building something, that every wire transfer was an investment in the people who mattered most. When Jessica totaled her Honda, I paid the $5,000 deductible without question. When Dad's back went out and he couldn't work construction, I covered the mortgage for 6 months straight. When Mom needed dental work, I maxed out my credit card because family takes care of family. But family? Real family doesn't convert your childhood bedroom into a craft room while you're deployed overseas. Real family doesn't forget to save you a seat at Thanksgiving dinner. Real family doesn't hand you a coffee mug that says Grumpy Vet while your sister unwraps a MacBook Pro under the same Christmas tree. I remember that moment so clearly now. The weight of that mug in my hands. Jessica squealing over her laptop, already planning her Instagram posts. Mom beaming with pride at how generous they'd been. Dad avoiding my eyes completely. "It's just a joke, sweetie," Mom had laughed when she saw my face. "You know we love you." Love, what a word. I'd trained for combat zones, Learned to survive in Afghanistan, Iraq, places where people actually wanted to kill me. But I could never survive my own living room. Every holiday was a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and backhanded compliments. Every phone call was a request wrapped in guilt and tied with a bow of family obligation. The smell of their house still clung to my clothes, that mixture of vanilla candles and disappointment that I'd never quite been able to scrub from my memory. I'd been sending half my paycheck to maintain a home where I wasn't even welcome anymore, supporting people who saw me as an ATM with combat boots. I sat in that driveway, engine finally running, heat fogging the windows, and realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I'd been playing house with people who'd already decided I didn't live there. The Christmas lights reflected in my rearview mirror as I drove away, looking like tiny stars mourning the death of something that had never really been alive. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you a solid place to build your foundation. And I was about to build something they'd never see coming. Because sometimes, the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who taught you how to fight in the first place. That foundation I mentioned? It started with a single Google search at 2 a.m. in my hotel room, 3 states away from their Christmas lights and hollow apologies. Mortgage records. Public information. What I found made my blood run cold and then, slowly, dangerously hot. The house they'd kicked me out of? The one where Dad played king of his castle, carving steak like he'd earned every brick in those walls? He couldn't have qualified for a loan to buy a used Honda, let alone a $340,000 home in their precious neighborhood. Credit score, 542. Income, sporadic contractor work, maybe $28,000 on a good year. Debt-to-income ratio that would make a loan officer laugh until they cried. But there, clear as daylight in the mortgage documents, was the truth that changed everything. Co-signer and income verification. Aria Matthews, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army. Annual income, $54,000. Credit score, 798. I wasn't just their daughter. I wasn't even just their ATM. I was their entire financial foundation, and they'd built their comfortable life on my invisible back while treating me like a burden at their dinner table. My laptop screen blurred for a second. Not from tears, I was past those. From pure, crystalline rage. I opened my banking app with shaking fingers. 8 years of automatic transfers stared back at me. Mortgage payment? $2,847 monthly. Jessica's car insurance, $340. Utilities under my name, $185. Even their cable bill, their goddamn premium cable package with HBO, was coming out of my account. $3,372 every single month. For 96 months. Over $323,000 of my money, flowing silently into their lives while they made jokes about my intensity and forgot to set a place for me at their own table. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. First, Chase Mortgage Services. I need to remove myself as co-signer and halt all automatic payments effective immediately. Ma'am, that will trigger a payment review. The primary borrower will need to requalify or face foreclosure proceedings. I understand completely. All future communication should go through Ronald Matthews, the primary borrower. Second, Progressive Auto Insurance. Cancel automatic payments for policy ending in 7,749. Third, Portland General Electric. Transfer account to Ronald Matthews. I'm no longer responsible for this address. Then I waited and documented everything. The first call came 6 hours later. Dad's number. I let it ring. The second. Mom, voice shaky. Aria, honey, there seems to be some confusion with the bank. I let that one ring too. By evening, 7 missed calls, 2 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. Then, one that made me smile for the first time in days. Miss Matthews, this is attorney Richard Kellerman representing the Matthews family. We need to discuss some urgent financial matters. Please return this call immediately. Their lawyer. Not when I was deployed overseas, missing birthdays and holidays. Not when I was eating ramen so they could have steak dinners. Not when I was sacrificing my own future for people who couldn't remember my middle name. But now? Now that their free ride was over? Now they had an attorney on speed dial. I saved that voicemail, forwarded it to my email, backed it up to the cloud. Because sometimes the most beautiful evidence comes wrapped in pure, unfiltered panic. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "What did you do? Dad's having chest pains and Mom won't stop crying. You're being so selfish." I typed back slowly, savoring each word. "I'm being exactly what you taught me to be. Self-sufficient. The real war was just beginning." And this time, I held all the ammunition. The ammunition I mentioned? It wasn't bullets or bombs. It was something far more devastating in the digital age. The truth, served cold and documented. I didn't call them back, didn't text angry paragraphs or show up at their door demanding explanations. Instead, I did something that would have made my drill sergeant proud. I went completely, strategically silent. From my motel room, I'd checked into a Holiday Inn Express rather than fly back to base. Because this war required proximity, I opened my laptop and began building their destruction one screenshot at a time. Click. Bank transfer to Ronald Matthews. December 2023. $2,847. Click. Progressive Auto Insurance, Jessica Matthews. $340. Click. Portland General Electric, account holder change request. Declined, payment source required. Click. Chase mortgage statement showing primary borrower income insufficient for loan approval. 23 screenshots. 8 years of financial records. Every wire transfer, every auto payment. Every time I'd quietly covered their asses while they lived like they'd earned it. I created a Facebook album. Simple title, just so we're clear. No commentary. No bitter captions. No dramatic paragraphs about betrayal or heartbreak. Just raw, undeniable evidence that told the story better than any words ever could. Posted at 11:47 p.m. Then I cracked open a bottle of Jack Daniels from the motel vending machine, ordered Chinese takeout, and watched the world burn from my polyester bedspread. The reactions started within minutes. Cousin Marie. "Arya, are you serious? You were paying all that? They always made it sound like you just disappeared on them." High school friend Jenny. "Holy shit, girl, I had no idea. Your dad told everyone you were too good for family gatherings." Uncle Pete. "Your father owes me an apology, and you deserve better." But the real entertainment began when the screenshots started making rounds in the wider family networks. Shared, reshared, forwarded to family group chats I'd been excluded from years ago. By morning, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from since high school. The narrative my parents had carefully constructed, the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her loving family, was crumbling in real time. Mom's Facebook, account deleted. Dad's last post, changed to private. Jessica. Some people thrive on drama and attention. Real family handles things privately. I laughed out loud at that one. Privately? Like they'd handled cutting me out of Christmas dinner? Like they'd handled spending my money for 8 years while treating me like an obligation? The motel room phone rang. I unplugged it. My cell buzzed with unknown numbers. I blocked them all. A knock at my door around noon. I ordered more takeout instead of answering. Because here's what they didn't understand about military training. Sometimes the most devastating attack is the one that never comes. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon in your arsenal. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them realize what it feels like when the person who'd been holding up their entire world just stops. I sipped my whiskey and scrolled through comment after comment from family members expressing shock, disappointment, and long overdue clarity about who the real villain was in this story. For 8 years, I'd been playing a game where the rules kept changing, where my sacrifices were invisible but my presence was inconvenient, where I was essential but unwanted. They thought I was just a chess piece they could move around their board, sacrifice when convenient, ignore when unnecessary. But they were about to learn something that would shatter their little world completely. This wasn't their chessboard, it had been mine all along. And I was 3 moves away from checkmate. That checkmate I mentioned? It arrived faster than I expected, wrapped in a phone call from their lawyer at 7:43 a.m. "Miss Matthews, this is Richard Kellerman. Your family would like to meet. Today, neutral ground, Denny's on Highway 12, 6 o'clock. We can resolve this professionally." I almost laughed. Now they wanted professional. Now they wanted meetings. I'll be there, I said. Tell them to bring their checkbooks. I spent the day preparing like I was heading into combat. Because in every way that mattered, I was. The manila folder sat on my passenger seat, thick enough to choke a horse. Every bank statement, every auto payment confirmation, every wire transfer receipt. 8 years of financial documentation that told the real story of the Matthews family success. I walked into Denny's at exactly 6:02 p.m. They were already there. Dad in his good jacket, looking smaller than I remembered. Mom clutching her purse like a shield. Jessica wearing sunglasses indoors, probably hiding the evidence of tears. And their attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who clearly charged by the hour. I slid into the booth across from them, set the folder on the table like I was laying down a royal flush. Let's skip the small talk, I said. Dad cleared his throat. Arya, we're family. We've all said things we didn't mean. Your mother's been crying for days. Stop. My voice cut through his rehearsed speech like a blade. Just stop. I opened the folder, slid the first document across the table. December 2015. First mortgage payment. My bank account to yours. $2,847. Another document. January 2016. Same amount, same account. Another. February, March, April. The stack grew. Their faces paled. Jessica's car insurance. Every month for 3 years. My credit card. Slide. Utility bills under my name because Dad's credit wouldn't qualify. Slide. Property taxes I paid while deployed overseas. Slide. Mom's hands shook. We never asked. You never had to ask. I slammed my palm on the table. Every head in the restaurant turned. You just expected. You just took. And when I needed something as simple as a place at your Christmas table, you told me I made things awkward. Jessica pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and desperate. Posting our private business online was cruel. Private? I laughed, cold and sharp. You want to talk about private? Let me tell you what's private, Jess. Private is eating ramen noodles for 3 weeks so I could cover your car payment. Private is working double shifts so you could have your precious lifestyle while treating me like hired help. The lawyer leaned forward. Miss Matthews, perhaps we can discuss a payment plan. That's when the bell above the diner door chimed. Every head at our table turned. Uncle Victor stood in the doorway, his silver cane tapping against the tile floor. At 78, he still commanded a room just by breathing in it. Dad's face went white. Victor, I didn't know you were in town. You never do, Uncle Victor said, walking slowly to our table. That's been your problem for 40 years, Ron. He looked at each of them in turn, then settled his sharp gray eyes on me. Arya, good to see you holding your ground. Then he turned to my parents, and his voice dropped to that quiet tone that made smart people nervous. I heard about your little Christmas dinner conversation. About how you told the only person in this family with honor that she wasn't welcome at her own table. Mom started to speak. Victor raised one weathered hand. I also heard about the financial arrangements. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a legal envelope, thick and official. Which brings me to why I'm here. He dropped the envelope on the table like he was playing his final card. My will. Updated and notarized 3 days ago. Everything I own, the house, the land, the savings account with $240,000 in it, now belongs to Arya. The silence that followed was nuclear. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. Mom pressed her hands to her chest like her heart was stopping. You can't be serious, Dad whispered. Victor looked at him with pure disgust. I've never been more serious in my life. For 30 years, you've treated your daughter like an ATM while playing the victim. She's the only one who visited when I had my heart attack. The only one who called on my birthday. The only one who showed up when it mattered. He leaned on his cane, towering over them even while seated. She's more family to me than any of you ever were. I stared at the envelope, then at the man who'd just changed my life forever. Uncle Victor, you earned it, kid. And they? He gestured dismissively at my parents. They earned exactly what they're getting, nothing. I stood up, leaving their folder of evidence on the table like scattered bones. You know what the difference is between us? I looked at each of them. You took things from me. I gave things to you. But I'm done giving to people who only know how to take. Dad's voice cracked. Arya, please? No. I picked up Uncle Victor's envelope. For 8 years, I funded my own erasure. I paid for the house I wasn't welcome in, supported the family that didn't want me, sacrificed my own future for people who saw me as a burden. I looked them each in the eye one final time. You taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up, and you never did. The war was over. And I'd won more than I'd ever dreamed possible. The victory I'd just tasted? It should have been sweet. But watching my father's face crumple as Uncle Victor walked away, seeing my mother's hands shake as she reached for tissues that weren't there, I felt something unexpected settle in my chest. Not regret, not guilt, just quiet. Dad slammed his palm on the Formica table, making the salt shaker jump. You've ruined Christmas. You've destroyed this family. I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. This man who'd raised me to believe that family meant sacrifice, but only from one direction. This man who'd spent my money while teaching me I wasn't worth a seat at his table. Dad, I said, my voice steady as stone, I wasn't invited to Christmas to begin with. Mom's tears started then. The ugly kind that leave mascara tracks and shatter carefully maintained composure. Please, Arya. You're still our daughter, this inheritance thing. We can work this out. We're family. Family. That word again. Family is a two-way street, Mom. I've been walking it alone for 8 years. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. I stood up, leaving their evidence folder on the table like abandoned dreams. We're done discussing. We're done negotiating. We're done pretending this was ever about love instead of convenience. Jessica finally spoke, her voice small and broken. What are we supposed to do now? The house payment. Dad can't qualify on his own. Mom's medical bills. I paused at their table, one hand on the back of my empty chair. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful people. You managed to live comfortably for 8 years on someone else's dime while convincing yourselves you deserved it. Walking out of that diner, I could hear Mom's sobs echoing behind me. Dad's voice, cracked and desperate, calling my name, but their sounds faded as the door swung shut, replaced by the quiet hum of my rental car and the open road ahead. 3 months later, I'm sitting in Uncle Victor's kitchen, my kitchen now, watching snow fall through windows that actually belong to me. The house smells like coffee and possibility instead of obligation and resentment. The inheritance was more than money. It was validation. It was someone finally saying, you matter. Your sacrifices were seen. Your worth isn't measured by what you can provide. I still get messages sometimes. Holiday guilt trips from relatives who think I should forgive and forget. Christmas cards addressed to my old base, forwarded 3 times before finding their way here. I don't open them anymore. Because here's what I learned from 8 years of funding my own erasure. Some relationships aren't broken by conflict, they're revealed by it. What I thought was family love was actually financial dependency wearing a mask of obligation. Real love doesn't come with invoices. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't tell you that Christmas is better without you while cashing the checks you send to keep their lights on. Uncle Victor taught me something in his final months before passing last spring. Something he whispered while I helped him with his medication, while I made sure he wasn't alone, while I showed up because that's what family does. Love, he said, isn't what people say when they need something from you. It's what they do when you need something from them. I keep that lesson close now, along with his purple heart on the mantle and the deed to this house in my name. Not because I needed his money, but because someone finally understood the difference between being used and being loved. The snow keeps falling outside my window in my house, bought with my uncle's belief that I deserved better. And for the first time in years, I actually do. The stillness I mentioned? It arrived with the sound of my key turning in Uncle Victor's front door, my front door now, for the first time as its rightful owner. 6 months had passed since that night at Denny's. 6 months since I'd walked away from the wreckage of what I'd once called family. The house welcomed me with the smell of lemon oil and old books, sunlight streaming through windows that had known decades of honest love. I set my single suitcase down in the hallway and just breathed. For the first time in 8 years, I was home. Not visiting, not crashing temporarily, not sleeping on someone else's couch while they calculated what I owed them. Home. The phone calls had stopped after the first month. I'd blocked their numbers one by one, watching each contact disappear from my phone like deleting old wounds. Mom's number, Dad's, Jessica's, even the lawyer's. Each deletion felt like releasing a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there. There were no more guilt trips in my voicemail. No more emergency financial requests. No more Christmas invitations that came with conditions and silent resentment. Just silence. But not the cold, rejecting kind I'd known at their dinner table. This was the warm silence of peace. I walked through Uncle Victor's living room, running my fingers along the mantelpiece where his purple heart still sat beside a photo of us from last Christmas. The Christmas where someone had actually wanted me there. In the kitchen, I found his note, written in his careful handwriting, for Arya, the daughter I never had, but always deserved. That evening, I lit a single candle and placed it in the front window. Not for them, not for the family who'd taught me that love was conditional on usefulness. I lit it for everyone who'd ever been told they were too much or not enough, who'd ever funded their own erasure while believing it was love. Because here's what 8 years of financial and emotional manipulation taught me. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. You don't owe anyone your future because they gave you your past, and you certainly don't owe anyone your presence at a table where you're treated like an unwelcome guest. Real family, the kind Uncle Victor showed me, doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand payment for basic affection. It doesn't tell you that holidays are better without you while cashing the checks you send to keep their lights on. I learned 3 truths that changed everything. First, never underestimate someone who has given you everything. They know exactly what it's worth, and exactly what it costs to take it away. Second, greed can blind people to consequences, but justice never sleeps. It just waits for the right moment to present its bill. Third, some losses can't be recovered, but the truth always brings freedom. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can buy is your own self-respect. The candle flickered in my window, casting warm light into the December darkness. Somewhere across town they were probably gathering around their table, discovering what Christmas felt like when the person who'd been financing it for 8 years was finally, truly absent. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the future I could finally build, one where my worth wasn't measured by my bank account, where my presence was wanted rather than tolerated, where love didn't come with monthly payment plans. For the first time in years, I was spending Christmas with family, real family, the kind you choose, not the kind that chooses to use you. I used to believe that blood made you family. Now I know better. Family is built on truth, respect, and showing up when it matters. Everything else is just expensive theater, and I'm done buying tickets to shows where I was never meant to be the star. The candle burned steady in my window. Christmas was finally, truly mine.